orphaned at the age of 4 and is sent into the Japanese foster care system. After multiple failed attempts at finding a forever home and some unfortunate circumstance, he ends up on the streets. Eventually, the vigilante, Deku, appears. Eraserhead must gain his trust to bring Deku back to the right side of the law. If he does, however, the untrustful but pure-hearted boy may just be a bit more than Aizawa Shota can handle. From the heat of the fire. Each lick of the flames rising higher as the destructive force grew. The screams of the woman who had been stuck in the home resounded in the detective's ears. 11 minutes. It took 11 minutes for support to arrive. The woman might have been pretty at the start of the day. Her wide green eyes and softly rounded face the only clues to what once could have been a person. Soot covered most of her body now. Charred flesh was still cooking even as the healer attempted to put out the embers residing in her flesh. No, not flesh anymore. What could be seen under the soot was an angry red. Blood seeped out of every pore and a white film was attempting to form on some of the areas that the healer had finally managed to put out. Who knew that fire could continue burning even without visible flames? What was most painful for the detective wasn't the sight of the woman or the smell of her burning skin, not even the screams of agony that pierced the air at certain intervals. No, it was the pleading. My son. Please, my son. Izuku. He was in his room. You have to get him. I locked him in to protect him. Please. Izuku, my son. Her pleas sounded desperate, guilty. They were broken up only by the short but intense screams that rattled her body when the healer touched some part of her that miraculously still maintained nerve function. The three heroes on scene cringed at her cries. They couldn't do anything. The fire was too volatile. Any attempt at nearing the flames would only lead to further casualty. They needed to wait for someone better suited for this job. Someone with a strong water-based quirk. At this point, however, if there really was a child in that building, he was probably already dead. The cause of the destruction was being led away, handcuffed and muzzled for the protection of the officers transporting the fire breather. He had no mark on him immune to his own flame. His face beyond the muzzle seemed shocked. Awed at the destruction he had caused. Most domestic abusers never actually meant to cause such devastation, after all. They only acted out for control. To maintain and monopolize on their power in the home. If they went overboard, well, look at where the fire breather was now, locked in chains and headed to a secure facility to await trial. All control lost in a single instance of overzealous rage. Mama was going to be upset at him if he didn't get back soon. He had been away for too long. He hadn't meant to fall asleep on the park bench. Really, he hadn't. Daddy was just yelling so loud, and no matter how hard he covered his ears, the screams still bled into his mind. He just wanted to escape for a little bit. Mama's cries were so hard to hear and he couldn't help her until the morning anyway. Getting out of his room wasn't hard. It hadn't been for a while. The tree near his window had been climbed many times by now. Kaken had helped him to learn to climb trees before everything started to get so bad. Turning the corner, the bright light of the burning building came into view. What was happening? Mama was in there. Daddy was in there. Why was the house burning so much? The fire trucks that surrounded the home weren't doing anything. In fact, the fire just seemed to get bigger with each of the small boy's steps. Mama! Mama! The wide-eyed child cried out as he neared the line of police cars. An arm snaked around his stomach, immediately stopping the child from going closer to the danger area. Whoa, kid! How the hell? The man seemed to be at a loss for words. His dark eyes wide as he took in the child that was now in his arms. Mama! My mama! I want my mama! The child wailed. The little body squirmed and tried his best to be set free, but the detective tightened his hold and refused to let the kid down. Kid! Kid! Are you Izuku? The detective asked urgently. Struggling for a moment and turned back toward the man that wouldn't allow his escape. His wide green eyes shone with tears and snot ran down from his nose. An all-night onesie draped loosely over his petite form. The child nodded slightly. Detective Tsukachi breathed a sigh of relief at the confirmation before focusing on calming the small child. He had almost succeeded when another scream tore from the woman still being triaged. "My son. Please." The little boy began squirming again, and this time, the detective could not keep his grip on the child. Tsukachi raced after the little form but was unable to keep him from seeing the sight of his half-dead mother. Honestly, Tsukachi wasn't even sure if the kid would recognize her. The world did not exist anymore. Only pain and anxiety permeated reality. She knew she was screaming. She knew she was begging for her son, but no one seemed to answer her. Her ears were ringing. Maybe she just couldn't hear them? A cold and small something touched her arm. It hurt. It hurt so much. But it was familiar. Even with her body screaming, she knew that touch. Inko hadn't realized her eyes were closed until she had to force them open. Swirling lights and color blurred her vision, but Inko finally found him. He was safe. He wasn't hurt. Her son. Her Izuku. "Baby. I'm so glad you are okay." She cooed weakly. The fight left her body for the first time since her husband had first hit her that night. "I'm so sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." Deja vu permeated her less than together mind. How many times had she said that to her son in the last 2 weeks? How many times had she apologized as she watched her child cry over his shattered dreams? She couldn't let that be the last thing he heard from her. She had to tell him even if she didn't see how it was possible. "Aizu." It was hard to breathe. "Izuku." Everything hurt. "You can, baby." Why was he crying? Was he hurt? I lied before. The world wasn't hurting so much anymore. Everything was fading to black. "You can be a hero." She wasn't really sure if the last words even came out. "His name is Midoriya Izuku. 4 years old." Detective Tsukachi whispered to the older woman standing in front of him. Her hair was tied back in a tight bun and she scribbled on a clipboard as he spoke. They both stood near the door of the hospital room, as far from the bed as they could get without leaving the room. The small boy did not stir as he slept on the hospital gurney. "We were lucky to find him after a domestic violence incident ended in a major fire. His mother died at the scene. His father is awaiting his prison sentence." The detective gave her a moment to write down the information and only continued speaking when she glanced up at him. "We assume that he escaped through his bedroom window earlier that night via the tree in his yard. Probably to get away from the fighting." "You assume?" The woman spoke softly. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Ah, yes. He hasn't spoken since." Tsukachi took a breath before continuing. "He hasn't spoken since watching his mother die at the scene." The woman sighed but continued writing on her clipboard. She had probably seen plenty of similar cases and no longer reacted in the same way the detective did. "Any signs of obvious physical abuse on the boy?" "Yes. The child has healed burn marks along his back and shoulders. The doctors took some x-rays and there are multiple signs of old fractures and breaks in his arms, legs, and ribs. They do not appear to have been treated by medical personnel. Currently, he only has slight bruising to his abdomen and wrists." "Are there any records at the police station for domestic violence situations with this family?" There are 4 previous calls to emergency services in reference to domestic violence. 2 made by concerned neighbors. 1 from a family friend. And 1 from Midoriya Inko, the boy's mother. It seems she only called because her son had come up missing after a particularly harsh beating. He apparently left the home often when his parents fought. Was the child removed from the home at that time? No. Midoriya Hisashi, the boy's father, had left the home. Inko-san told detectives that it would be the last time. She was apparently very good to her child. At the time, he didn't have any marks on him and, after a visit to a child psychiatrist, was deemed to have never received any physical or mental abuse from the woman. It was decided that he would be safe with his mom. Obviously not. No, obviously not. Tsukachi rubbed the back of his neck. You said the child was 4? Are there any signs of a quirk or has it not developed yet? No. No signs of a quirk. In fact, his medical records have him listed as diagnosed quirkless as of 2 weeks ago. The woman faltered for the first time since their conversation started. She glanced over at the small, pale, sleeping child in the hospital bed. Are you sure? She asked. Tsukachi nodded, handing her the small folder containing Izuku's medical records. That is rare for children, nowadays. It will be much more difficult to have him adopted now. The woman shook her head sadly before looking back up at the detective. Either way, he is no longer the responsibility of the police department. Thank you for watching over him, Detective. I have him now. Both parties nodded to one another before Detective Tsukachi made his leave. He sighed and looked down at the child clutching her hand. He had grown taller and seemed relatively healthy if a little underweight. It had been 4 years since little Midoriya had entered under the state's care. Mochizuki had a lot of experience when it came to foster children, but this child was definitely one of her more difficult cases. The little boy looked up at her when he heard the sigh. His wide eyes were a vibrant green and the freckles dusting his face gave him an innocent look. He smiled at her shyly before bowing his head and fiddling with the hem of his shirt with his unoccupied hand. Midoriya-kun, Mochizuki spoke gently as she knelt down to his level. Are you ready to meet your new foster parents? The boy didn't make eye contact and shrugged his shoulders. Mochizuki waited patiently for a verbal reply. WWH the boy stopped and looked down, trying desperately to find his voice. What if they don't like me? He whispered. Why wouldn't they like you, Midoriya-kun? Mochizuki replied. Because no one likes me. The boy mumbled. And not Gigi good. You are good, Midoriya-kun. Sometimes it just takes a little while to find the right fit. Mochizuki knew that the child wouldn't believe her. She didn't blame him, either. Too many homes had come and gone in the short 4 years the boy had been without his mother. And Mochizuki-san. I don't think that's true. I think him just not. The little child trailed off again, tears brimming his bright eyes. This will be the SS7th home, and Mochizuki-san. Am I doing something wrong? Am not running away anymore. US said that W would make them want me more. Mochizuki's heart broke a little at his words. He was right, of course. 7 homes in 4 years was uncommon, especially for children so young. The boy was relatively well behaved. He was quiet and showed good manners. He made good grades in school and worked hard to get along well with others. Midoriya's problems with staying in a home had been varied but ultimately came down to one factor: the child was different. The first and most obvious issue was that Midoriya was quirkless. In the current society, it was extremely rare for a child to be born quirkless. Even though only 80% of the world had quirks, most of the quirkless were elderly. In fact, only 1 in every 100,000 children were born quirkless in the current generation, and that number was dropping every year. On top of that, Midoriya had visible signs of the psychological trauma incurred by his past. The child rarely spoke, and when he did, his stutter made him difficult to understand. He cried at the drop of a hat and often struggled to calm himself down. He flinched away from most physical touch and would melt down if he was snuck up upon from behind. He had an extreme but understandable fear of fire as well as intense claustrophobia. He also was hesitant around adult men and would take at least a few months to warm up to them. At least he wasn't running away anymore. In the first 3 homes, Midoriya would run away when any sort of argument would occur. He always came back a few hours later, but it was stressful nonetheless. It was a pity that these incidents were now permanently on his record. Foster parents did not like these issues. One of the hardest parts of Mochizuki's job was finding foster parents for those in her charge. Japan heavily encouraged the foster to adopt programs for orphan children under the age of 13. Unfortunately, most parents refused quirkless children right away. If Mochizuki was able to find some that would accept a quirkless child, less than half would allow Midoriya to be their ward, mostly due to his multitude of negative blemishes on his record. If they did take Midoriya in, it was only a matter of time before his other issues became too much for the parents. A perfect example of this being his previous household. Mochizuki received the call at 1843 the previous night. Clearly flustered through the phone, her voice tense. "I don't think that this child is the right fit for us, Mochizuki-san. He just won't open up. He's been here for 5 months and hasn't spoken to Haruto at all." Haruto was the husband, Mochizuki had mentally reminded herself. He cries constantly but refuses to come to us for comfort. "I know that he has trust issues, but I'm afraid we are hurting him more than helping." That is very common for a child who has been in his situation. "We spoke about this before you agreed to take him on." I know we did. It's just." The line was silent for a moment. "Do you know that he is being picked on at school again? This is the second school that I have transferred him to since he has been living with us. The other children refuse to accept him. He hasn't made any friends. The teachers have been informed about his past but still struggle with him. They can't handle his breakdowns. They think he is actually just doing some of these behavioral things for attention, and I am starting to believe them." The last part was whispered and Mochizuki could tell that the woman on the other line was now quietly crying. "Amano-san," Mochizuki had interrupted, "it has only been 5 months. He may just need a little more TI. No. You aren't understanding. This child is terrified. I've been stopped by 2 pro heroes on separate occasions while out shopping due to his behavior in the past week. It is obvious they think that we are the ones abusing him. What will I do if the child lies just to get away? I will never have another chance at adopting. Mochizuki-san, all I want is a baby that I can call my own. But I want that baby to want me too. I can't force this child to stay in a place where he obviously isn't happy, nor can I risk the idea that he may ruin my chance at a family. So please, Mochizuki-san. Please just come pick him up. I'm sorry." The call had pretty much ended there. Mochizuki had told Amano-san that she would pick Midoriya-kun up the next morning. "Midoriya-kun," Mochizuki began after a moment to think, "I want you to do something for me this time, okay?" The small boy looked up into her eyes again, listening intently. "I want you to try your very, very best to talk to your new guardians. I think it might help them get to know you better." Midoriya nodded silently. "I also want you to try your best to not cry all the time. It is okay to be sad and scared, but you are a big boy now. Big boys shouldn't cry that much. Do you see heroes crying on TV?" Midoriya shook his head. "No. Heroes are strong." "That's right, Midoriya-kun. All Might is your favorite hero, right?" The small boy nodded. "Then I want you to try to act how All Might does whenever you feel like you are about to cry. Do you want to practice?" The young child wiped his eyes and gave a wobbly smile to Mochizuki. All Might always smiles. "That's right. Very good, Midoriya-kun. Now, do you want to knock on the door or do you want me to?" All Might would knock. "So I will." With that, a tiny, trembling fist gently tapped 3 times, and Midoriya was introduced to his 7th set of foster parents. Izuku knew that he had to make this home work. Even if Mochizuki-san tried to hide it from him, Izuku had overheard her talking with her boss. After this home, he would be shipped off to a group home or an orphanage. Most likely the latter due to his young age. No one else would take him. This was his last option. So Izuku had to try his best. The Okabe household was very similar to his previous homes at first. They welcomed Izuku with open arms and cheerful smiles on their faces. Izuku tried really hard to return their smiles and conversation. Really, he did. It was just hard to talk sometimes when he met new people. His throat became dry and a heavy lump settled in its base. His mouth would clamp shut, and even when he did his best to make a sound, nothing would come out. People didn't mind at first. No one ever minded at first. They let Izuku stay in his new room and didn't push him hard. Izuku appreciated that. Okabe-mai, his foster mom, wasn't difficult to speak to. The mothers never were. Izuku was able to speak to her within 2 days. Eventually, after about 2 weeks of trying really hard, Izuku was able to get out a good morning to Okabe Daichi, the man of the house. He felt pride when Daichi-san smiled happily at him over his paper. In all honesty, Izuku thought that maybe this might actually work out this time. At least he did at first. A month in, something changed. Or maybe, Izuku had changed. He had dropped his glass of milk when a loud noise sounded from outside. Izuku didn't mean to. He didn't want to cause problems. Mai-san had been stressed out that day. Izuku thought it might have been his fault. He was probably being a hassle again. Izuku knew it was his fault when he saw the look on Mai-san's face after the glass shattered. I am sorry. Izuku stammered out. He reached for the paper towels and carefully started cleaning up the mess, wary of the sharp glass that he was moving into a pile. You need to learn to not be so clumsy, Izu-chan. Although the words weren't mean, Mai-san's tone was cold. He has never hurt her like this before. Izuku didn't know how to respond, so he just apologized again. Mai-chan told him to go to his room. She would clean it up before anything else was broken. From then on, Izuku wasn't allowed to use any big boy cups. He was given a sippy cup with a lid. He hadn't used a sippy cup since before he still lived with Mama. Yet, here he was, 8 years old and being treated like a toddler. The kids at school thought it was funny when he even got a sippy cup in his lunchbox. He came home with a few bruises after that. A few weeks later, Izuku had been outside. When he came in, mud was tracked into the foyer. Mai-san told Daichi-san about it over dinner, and it was decided that his punishment would be no outside time for a week. Izuku didn't mind too much, but it was really hard to not do anything else wrong when he just wanted to move. It had always been hard to stay still, but this punishment made it a lot harder. Izuku still struggled to talk clearly. He was getting better slowly, but Mai-san would get frustrated with him when he couldn't just spit it out already. The first time he cried because of his frustration, Mai-san had slapped him across the face and told him to go to his room. But it was okay, because she came in a little later to apologize. She was just overwhelmed. She didn't mean it. Daddy never apologized. Izuku should just try harder to not cry. Daichi-san was a good person, but he didn't tolerate disorder. When Izuku left his school book on the kitchen counter, Daichi-san threw it in the garbage can. If you don't put it away, then I will assume it is trash. He had told Izuku. Izuku got in trouble with his teacher the next day for not having his homework. When Izuku took a bathroom break while playing with his All Might action figure that Mama had gotten him, he was glad he took it with him the night of the fire since it didn't burn up like everything else. He left it on the couch. Daichi was upset with him and took the toy away. Izuku never got it back. Around the 6-month mark, Izuku's class figured out that he was quirkless. Izuku had tried to keep it secret, but that could only last for so long. Izuku started coming home with more injuries. They made Mai-san and Daichi-san sad. They told him that he had to stand up for himself. They told him that it was obviously his fault if he got hurt when the other kids hit him. If he just tried harder. If he was just better. Ended up in the hospital after being pushed and hitting his head really hard. Daichi-san decided to send him to a new elementary school. Kaken was there. But Kaken wasn't like he used to be. Kaken found out that Izuku was quirkless. Izuku became Deku. Deku started to realize that he really was just useless. Daichi-san and Mai-san were not bad people. They let him take some self-defense classes when he moved to Kaken's school. Izuku practiced really hard to make Daichi-san and Mai-san proud of him. Daichi-san said he had made it really far in karate when he was little. Izuku preferred judo moves, so Daichi-san let him take a mixed martial arts class to help with his confidence. When Izuku was hugged from behind in one of the classes, he messed everything up. He tried really hard to smile like All Might, but his chest had squeezed up. He could feel his skin burning even though nothing was actually happening. Daichi-san was not happy to have to put him in individual classes and ultimately stopped taking Izuku at all. Instead, Daichi tried to teach Izuku at home. Daichi wasn't the most patient teacher. Izuku did his best to follow all the rules but would mess up sometimes. Each time, the punishments got worse or would last longer. Izuku knew he probably deserved it. The first time Mai-san hit Izuku without prompting, he had just turned 10. By the end of the year, Daichi-san had also started hitting Izuku as well. One day, after both Mai-san and Daichi-san had kicked him around a little, something snapped inside Izuku's brain. He wasn't sure exactly what had happened. He was only aware that he had fought back and managed to get out. Izuku never fought back before. Was he bad now? Was he a villain for hitting the people who had so kindly taken him in? Mai-san and Daichi-san probably never wanted to see him again. They were going to give him up. He would end up in the group home or the orphanage and not be cared for anymore. Did he deserve to be cared for though? He had caused so much trouble to everyone around him. Maybe it was better if he just disappeared. Maybe it would be better if he just didn't go back. So he didn't. For missing persons posters to appear around town for Izuku. The news talked about his case for about 3 days. It didn't take too long for everyone to forget that he existed after that. It was really hard at first. Izuku didn't know where he would sleep. He didn't know where to find food. He was filthy and hadn't showered in what seemed like forever. But this is what he deserved. Eventually, things became a little easier for the 11-year-old. Izuku had found a few hiding places that would provide a few hours of sleep. He learned to scavenge for food behind restaurants, and he would wash himself off the best he could in the river at the park nearby. Izuku could do this. This way, he wouldn't be a burden to anyone. Even if Izuku was worthless, it was better than being a burden. The biggest problem that Izuku faced didn't appear until after he had settled into this new routine. You see, Izuku was bored. He didn't go to school anymore and his mind was aching to gather information. He had always been good at analyzing things. He was constantly searching for new things to learn, and this monotonous lack of information was driving him up the wall. He needed stimulation. He needed to learn. So Izuku became a regular at the local library. It wasn't hard to trick the receptionist. The best lies always held some truth after all. "I'm quirkless, so mama thought it would be best to homeschool me. I'll be reading and doing schoolwork while she is working during the week. I promise not to cause any trouble," he had told the lady when she questioned him. The woman had accepted his tale and left him alone after that. It was easy to make people leave you alone when they found out you were useless harmless. Izuku read everything he could. He started with the more fun books like manga and fantasy novels, but quickly figured that he should be doing something more useful with his time. Every week, he would choose a subject to study. Maths, science, literature, English, technology, engineering, quirk studies, etc. It wasn't too hard to teach himself. There were a few road bumps where he would have to ask for permission to use the computer to understand a concept, but overall, Izuku did pretty well by himself. Izuku took an old practice test at the end of the school year to see if he was advancing. The library held previous copies to help kids study. Izuku did well and altered his education plan to further encompass the subjects he struggled with. Izuku had been living on his own for about 8 months when it happened. He had been walking around the back of the restaurant he liked to visit when he heard the woman scream. His body froze and his ears strained to pick up more noise. Another scream. Izuku ran towards it. This is a stupid idea, he thought to himself. The woman was being attacked by a relatively short and stocky man. His features were covered up by an oversized hoodie. The man was running his hands up the woman's shirt and attempting to pull down her skirt. The woman was trying to fight back, but her arms were glued to the wall she was leaning against with some type of brown substance. Izuku reacted before he could think. The man was lying on the ground in an instant, having been pushed over by the relatively small boy. Izuku scrambled to help the woman out of the substance but was tackled to the ground by the man. "That is my prey," the man snarled. His face inches from Izuku's. The man had pincers for his nose and mouth. His eyes were black bulges and the brown substance dripped from his face. Izuku tried to kick the man off, but he wasn't strong enough. He glanced at the woman to see if she was okay and was glad that she was still struggling to get out. She continued to scream for help while Izuku was punched a few times by the bugman. He screamed too, but his throat had closed up, his chest had tightened, and his mouth had clamped closed again. Damn it. Sometimes he really hated his selective mutism. Screw anyone who said it was a choice to not talk. It didn't matter though, because within only a few seconds, a white bandage-looking thing wrapped around the bug man, relieving Izuku of his weight. Izuku slowly sat up to find the man tied tightly, unable to escape from the bindings. A tall man with stringy black hair was checking on the woman. The man turned to Izuku once he assured that the woman was okay. "Hey kid. That was a really stupid stunt you pulled just then," the man grumbled. Izuku did his best to open his mouth but no sound came out. He decided to nod to show that he had heard. "You okay, kid?" the man asked as he knelt down to inspect Izuku. The man didn't touch him, which Izuku was grateful for at that moment. "Kid?" Izuku looked up at the man, meeting his eyes for a second before looking away. He couldn't cry. He had to be like All Might. A wobbly smile graced his lips to show the man that he was fine. The man didn't seem convinced. It had been a long night already. The school day had seemed to drag on as his class acted up. He swore that these kids purposely wasted his time. He couldn't even catch any sleep due to their insistence at making noise. Then, he had the graveyard shift for patrol. It was quiet, which just made Eraserhead more tired. Having been awake for 72 hours was no easy feat. Curse his insomnia. Just as he was about to start running laps to help wake up, he had heard the scream. In an instant, Eraserhead had taken off towards the noise. As he got closer, he saw a small figure run headfirst at the man who was seemingly attacking the screaming woman. The kid landed a solid hit on the man before being overpowered. The man was beating the kid shitless, yelling about his prey when Eraserhead was finally close enough to wrap him in his capture weapon. The woman was fine but stuck to the wall. Eraserhead assured her that everything was safe and showed his hero license as proof. She was shaken but unhurt. A quick call to the police later and then Eraser turned towards the kid who was just now sitting up slowly. At some point during his phone call with the police, the woman had lost consciousness, probably from shock and exhaustion. He checked her over again but couldn't do much with her glued to a wall. There was still another victim to handle as well. The kid must have been only 12 at the most. He was small and skinny and purple bruises were already forming on the kid's right eye and jaw. Eraser tried to make sure that the kid was okay and to tell the kid that he was an idiot, but the kid did not make a sound or look up in his direction. "Kid?" he asked as he knelt down to be eye level with the child. Maybe the beating had been worse than it looked. Maybe the kid was concussed or in shock. The boy finally looked up and made eye contact, a pitiful smile gracing his lips. It set Eraserhead on edge a bit, though he couldn't quite pinpoint why. "You okay, kid? I've got police on the way. Do you need an ambulance?" The boy shook his head violently, his eyes going wide as he started to back away from Eraserhead. Okay. No ambulance. Fine. Eraserhead grumbled something under his breath about stupid brats but then began looking over the boy once more. "I need to make sure you aren't concussed. Come here and look into this light." The boy stopped moving away and allowed Eraserhead to shine the light in his eyes. When Eraserhead went to tilt the child's head to the side to inspect his injuries, the child flinched back. I'm not gonna hurt you, kid. Eraserhead sighed. I'm a hero. The kid nodded slowly but still backed up when Eraserhead moved towards him again. This was getting ridiculous. Can you talk? A nod. Why aren't you? The kid shrugged his shoulders. Can you sign? Head. Well, I'm gonna need you to answer some questions, and so are the police, so we will need to figure this talking thing out. The kid panicked again and stumbled to stand. Eraserhead grabbed him by the arm before he could run. The kid froze and his legs buckled as he yanked his arm out of Eraserhead's grasp. Eraserhead pinched the bridge of his nose. This kid was obviously abused. Eraserhead had seen too many victims to not know the signs. He would need to tread lightly. This was not his forte. The kid slowly pulled his tattered bag from behind his back and took out some used paper and a pencil. He wrote something quickly and passed it to the hero. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize, kid. Eraserhead sighed again. How many times had he done that in the last few minutes? The kid took the paper back and scribbled more words. I'm a selective mute. I can't help it. I'm sorry. That's fine, kid. Are you hurt? Other than the obvious? I'm fine. Eraserhead must have given the kid a look because the kid quickly began writing again. Really? Just a little pain in my face, but that's probably from being punched. Thank you for helping us, Eraserhead. No problem, it's my job. Eraserhead paused for a moment and looked at the kid again. How'd you know my name? I only showed my license to that woman. He tilted his head towards the woman who was still stuck to the wall. She was still unconscious. The kid smiled for real this time and pulled a separate notebook from his bag. It was old and most of the pages had been pulled out, but it seemed well cared for beyond that. The kid flipped to a page and showed the hero. Pro Hero, Eraserhead. True name, unknown. Status, underground hero. Rank, undocumented. Age, unknown. Quirk, erase. Can erase the quirk of anyone he looks at. Unknown time limit. Support gear. The page went on for a while. It listed basic information and some details were scribbled in, most of it accurate. A detailed drawing of his hero costume was also supplied. The page was about half full. Eraserhead flipped a few pages and found other heroes written in. Most of the others had more information than his page, but they were also more well-known and stood in the spotlight more often. Eraserhead returned the book to the kid. That's pretty impressive. You like heroes? The kid nodded. Well, good. You're probably gonna be spending the rest of the night with one. The kid's eyes went wide again and he shook his head, scribbling once more. I'm okay, honest. I'll answer your questions about the attack, but then I really gotta go. Eraserhead thought for a moment. Okay. I'll take you home once we are done here then. The boy grimaced. His hand hesitating over the page. You don't have to. I know my way. It's my job to make sure you're safe. You shouldn't have even been out so late in the first place. Don't you have school tomorrow? What are you, 10, 11? I'm 11. And I'm homeschooled, so it's fine. For the first time in the conversation, the child gave Eraserhead a petulant look. What questions do you have? I'll answer and then I'll leave. The police will be here in a moment. You can talk to them. I'm not stupid and I know you aren't either. I'm not talking to any police. Tough luck, brat. The boy stood up then and took a few steps back from the hero. His eyes narrowing in distress. And no. The boy spoke for the first time. No? I am not Gigi gonna. You don't have much of a choice. The kid scribbled once more in his notebook. Then, the siren sounded in the nearby alleyway. Eraserhead looked up and then behind himself towards the noise. When he turned around, the kid was sprinting away. Eraserhead moved to go after the kid when he realized he couldn't just leave the woman and villain here. He groaned and then noticed a ripped piece of paper lying on the ground. You don't need to worry about me though. I won't be stupid again. Below the note were basic details of what happened for the police to write in their notes. Eraserhead could have kicked himself for letting the brat get away. Izuku was screwed if the police figured out who he was. He couldn't go back in the system. He couldn't be a burden anymore. So he ran. Again. He knew he was probably still causing trouble for Eraserhead even if it was just extra paperwork, but in the end, he was being much less of a hassle this way. Chapter 3. 1. Middle School English Lessons Extra. 3 days after the attack, Izuku started learning sign language. Eraserhead had a point. If he couldn't speak, it would be helpful to at least have some form of communication other than pen and paper. Most pro heroes were required to know sign language in order to help people on the job or communicate with one another in silence during a sting operation. It wasn't hard to find free classes being offered and supplemental books and videos to aid in his new endeavor. After only a few months, Izuku was becoming pretty good at Japanese Sign Language. The class leader had told him as much after one of the more difficult sessions. Izuku had beamed at the compliment and bowed in thanks. Unfortunately, that couldn't be said for other languages. As a middle school student, Izuku was expected to be taking English language classes. But, English was impossible for him to learn. He had attempted to attend the free tutoring session that the library offered but to no avail. He just could not understand this foreign monstrosity. Every day he mulled over the English textbook he had chosen, and every day, his mind fuzzed out as he studied. He was frustrated at having to reread the same pages over and over again. In the end, the boy simply gave up, opting to use JSL as his second language instead. It's not like it would ever matter. Only rich people or kids going to fancy high schools had to know English, anyway. And Izuku was definitely not rich, nor was he ever going to attend high school, let alone a top-tier high school. So all in all, it didn't really matter.